Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask me this morning if I would cover something, and I think I'll go ahead and do so. Yes, this is a topic I've rehashed a few times, but given that I'm picking up a couple thousand subscribers every month, a lot of new people coming in and out, this is actually a topic that's really worth discussing, as not enough people discuss this when everyone starts talking about protein intake, with protein intake being one of the biggest topics in the fitness world, yet no one really wants to mention this one thing. And it's because they might be worried about not being able to sell as much protein in this case. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skill at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And yeah, as you guys saw in the title, someone asked me, should Hardgainers versus Easygainers consume different amounts of protein, and why? And I think we need to address this, because people will jump in and say, well, are you telling me there's no such thing as an ectomorph or an endomorph? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Those somatypes, it's been debunked decades ago. Right, the bodybuilding world is the only people in the world still talking about this. And again, science has confirmed these aren't real. Yes, there are people who happen to have thick bone structures with high appetites, and there are people with thinner bone structures with low appetites. But there are just as many people in each structure type with the opposite end on the appetite. So what we need to focus on here is the appetite end. In other words, a hard gainer is someone who struggles to eat enough to gain weight. And an easy gainer is someone who struggles to eat little enough food to not gain fat, even at any given time. In other words, people who will struggle with their weight and body fat. And it comes down to appetite. It is appetite that is the primary factor involved with these. It has to do with how much food you eat. And if you want further proof, what I talk about with the hard gainers, anyone who claims to be a hard gainer and claims they eat a lot of food is delusional. And I don't mean delusional in a bad way. This meets the textbook definition of delusion. You believe that you eat a lot of food, but when it's objectively measured by someone else, you eat almost nothing. Like a lot of times the hard gainer doesn't understand why they can't gain weight when they're eating so much food, when they eat 1,000 less calories than some guys like me can cut on. In other words, we would lose weight on 1,000 more calories a day than they actually eat. They're not really eating that much food, in other words. Like their idea of stuffing themselves to death is 2,500 calories. Well, if you're lifting weights pretty vigorously and you're a healthy young man and you're eating 2,500 calories, you shouldn't be gaining weight at all. In fact, you should probably be losing weight. Unless you're already at 150 pounds, you're probably going to lose weight on that. If you've put on any amount of weight at all before, you're not even going to be able to maintain it. I mean, that's like 2,500 is low for someone who trains hard. It really is. It's very low. That should be cutting calories for most people. So what we're dealing with is an appetite issue. And protein is, as far as the different macronutrients go, the biggest regulator of calories in, calories out. So ultimately, all we're trying to do is adjust intake. And like for me, it's like I said for years, because all the data suggested it. And I would frequently go through long periods of time where I didn't eat a lot of protein. And again, as an easy gainer, someone like me who gains body fat easily, any phase in which I stopped trying to consume large amounts of protein and just eat normal, and because we know 150 grams of protein is more than enough for virtually anyone to gain muscle mass as far as protein intake goes, right? Even for someone who's over 200 pounds, you should be able to gain muscle easily on 150 grams a day. The problem we run into is that if you're thinking of it only in terms of gaining muscle, it's going to be a problem for the easy gainer, because what we find is that the more protein you eat, the less total calories you tend to eat. And the less calories you put out, because out of your different macronutrients, usually as far as thermic effect and everything else, as far as how efficient your body is with them, fats are very, very efficient. In other words, fats get utilized, stored, everything else, almost no thermic effect involved. Some fats from certain foods you will tend to not absorb all the fat, but that's a totally different topic. That's why nuts and things aren't as fattening as their caloric content would have you believe, in spite of being high fat. But normally fat we're very efficient with it. Carbs, there's some thermic effect with it. And when you overfeed carbs, there tends to be a larger thermic effect, because your body in humans doesn't really store excess carbs as fat. It doesn't. It tends to burn them off once glycogen stores are full and store all the fat you eat. Because carbs are your preferred fuel source, if you have enough glucose, your body doesn't necessarily need to burn fat. So you just store the excess fat that you eat at that point. And then protein is a totally different animal. There's a lot of thermic effect involved with consuming protein. There's a thermic effect involved with converting protein to glucose. It wastes calories. It has to use up calories doing that. There's a lot of extra energy output involved with large amounts of protein, combined with the fact that protein tends to have very high satiety. It tends to make you eat less on top of kicking more energy out. So you guys see where I'm about to go with this? The Hardgainer really doesn't need to eat a lot of protein. We could fall back for the Hardgainer, and so anyone who's telling the Hardgainer, oh, you need 1 or even 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, you are basically dooming that person to be really, really shredded but never gain any muscle probably the entire time you have them doing that. That's how you create the perpetual Hardgainer. It's a great marketing tactic because you can sell them tons of protein powder, and then they still don't make gains, so they're still going to need to keep coming back to you for information and products because they're still stuck at 155 or 160 pounds. And they don't really ever gain a significant amount of muscle in spite of all this protein, right? It's a great method for keeping them tiny. The Hardgainer needs to cut their protein down to that minimum to gain muscle, which is something like 1 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. You see where we're about to go with this. So if you've got one of these guys who's 160 pounds and struggling to gain, that's not a lot of protein. Because I think 160 is something in the ballpark of around 70 kilos. That guy doesn't need more than 100 grams of protein a day. He really doesn't. And if you have him only consume 100 grams of protein, he has plenty of room left for carbs and fat, which he can now actually eat more of to help gain body weight. He doesn't have to deal with all the thermic effect and appetite suppressing effect of the excess protein. He can now eat more food, and he can go ahead and successfully gain body weight. And these guys don't get fat if they don't eat a lot of junk food. If he's eating relatively clean, the Hardgainer is never going to get fat while training. So that shouldn't even be a real concern. They need to almost be perma-bulking, unless they have a reason to trim back down, which is easy for them. It's easy for them. Hell, literally all the Hardgainer has to do if he decides he's gotten too fat is to just increase his protein. And he'll, without even tracking anything, and he will go ahead and lean out. With literally no other changes. We all know people like that. All the ones who just, they eat real high protein and just get ripped all of a sudden. With no other changes. Without even tracking. That's what happens with the Hardgainer. Because that's their default position, is to lose weight. And they'll tend to drift back towards their natural set point, which will come from body fat first, particularly once protein is high. The Easygainer, on the other hand, people like me, just like we noted before with the Easygainer, if we drop our protein too low and just eat other stuff, we can pack on pounds. Like for me, guys, I can actually cut, anytime I cut down to 150 grams of protein or something like that, I have no trouble gaining 5 or 6 pounds every month without tracking and without eating junk food or anything else. I can literally just push myself up like that without even thinking about it, particularly if I don't watch the scale. I can gain over 1 pound a week easily. And I'm talking eating the chicken and brown rice and broccoli route, because I fall into the category of the Easygainer. For the Easygainer, we really do need the higher protein intake. The higher protein intake, again, just like we pointed out before, allows us to regulate our food intake better so that we don't gain as much fat when we are actually in a weight gaining phase of any type, because we won't overeat as much. The problem with the Easygainer, it's just like the Hardgainer doesn't have to actually do anything special. They don't have to do anything special to lose weight. We don't have to do anything special to bulk. All we have to do is not track. All we have to do is not track what we're doing, and we have no trouble gaining 1 pound every single week, even training 5 or 6 days a week. So the Easygainer, the method to use here is to jack your protein intake up. We need a hell of a lot more protein. In my case, I'm eating right now. People are like, oh, you're losing weight at this point finally. Yeah, because I've had to just accept the fact that knowing I'm an Easygainer and knowing how this stuff works, I don't eat less than 300 grams of protein a day. I have days where I eat 400. That's kind of my baseline of where I try to stay. And when I eat 300 to 400 grams of protein, and I don't eat any junk food or highly refined foods while training 6 days a week, the scale starts coming down. And by that same token, I could still eat a really, really high protein intake if I decide I want to gain a few pounds again in the future. I can just eat more. With all I have to do is stop restricting my food as much. Stop pushing the plate away in the evening and just go to proteins again. Because that's what I do right now. That's how I regulate it. And that's what the Easygainer has to do. Oftentimes when we're hungry, we just have to snack on protein or fiber or both to, again, just help keep our appetite under control. And again, higher energy turnover. Because if you guys have to remember that when we talk about that all calories are not equal, as far as this calories in, calories out thing, it doesn't mean that calories in, calories out doesn't apply. It means that foods like protein tend to reduce your calories in and they increase your calories out. And that's where people make the mistake of they assume that it's consuming the same amount of calories is the only end of the equation. Well, different macros produce different effects on the calories outside also. And when you understand that, then the calories in, calories out model, which is more dynamic than people seem to think it is, makes a lot more sense. And so what I'm saying here as a general rule is that the higher your appetite is, again, you're an Easygainer. Again, if you have ever weighed well over 200 pounds and you're less than 6 foot tall, at any point in your life, you're probably an Easygainer. Like when you didn't ever make a conscious effort to bulk. And whereas if you've ever been as a healthy adult male of age 21 or older, if you've ever been down to 150 or less, you're probably a Hardgainer. This is pretty easy to figure out here, guys. If you look at you in your natural state, even untrained, you can tell where people fall. The Hardgainer needs to eat less protein. The Easygainer needs to eat a hell of a lot more protein. And these are because these people are outliers. They're away from the average. The norm is to be in the middle, to have a normal appetite. But the Hardgainer has no appetite, and the Easygainer has a voracious appetite. And they're on a sliding scale in both directions. And generally speaking, the higher your appetite is, the much, much, much more protein you will need to help regulate your energy in and out equation. Whereas in the lower your appetite is, the further you slide down the Hardgainer spectrum, probably the lower you need to keep your overall protein as long as you're consuming enough to gain muscle. And that's the reality of it. It's a sliding scale in both directions. It's not a fixed number. It depends on, because different people fall at different points in this continuum as far as our appetites go. It's not just clearly defined lines with an exact formula. Again, think of it as a sliding appetite scale. And adjust your protein accordingly, according to individual goals at any given time. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.